My name is Roxanne Liu. I am currently the Programs and Projects Director of a business association here in the Philippines. Today, I will be discussing the role of business associations, its mission and its purpose, and assess how emerging trends and social political developments are changing the role of business associations and how they can adapt to the times. Business associations are usually nonprofit. They exist to help businesses, both large and small, overcome the challenges and obstacles they are unable to address alone. According to the Center for International Private Enterprise, business associations' work has a key multiplier effect on improving the commercial, governmental, and economic institutions of a given country. For many, membership is by invitation or for vetting by membership committees or the board. The reason is that business associations think collectively, not sectorally or per company basis, which means business associations normally have a set of principles and views they base their proposals on. For instance, the business organization I work for subscribes to democratic governance, application of the rule of law, healthy competition, and good business governance. There may be voices of dissent within the organization, but in general, they must share the same governance principles and values that a business association seeks to uphold. To help me assess the innovation opportunities in my organization, I interviewed two active leaders from business organizations in the Philippines and in Spain. Ms. Rizalina Mantaring, former president of the Management Association of the Philippines and my current board member, and Mr. Alejandro Rueda, programs director of the American Chamber of Commerce, Spain. I would like to share the highlights of our discussion, which provided me great insights on the new challenges and opportunities faced by business organizations here and abroad. What do you think po is the purpose of business associations, and how are they currently serving this purpose?
Business associations should, well, first of all, they're there to further the interests of business, but it's to further the interests of business, not any one business, which means you want to help create an environment that is conducive to the conduct of business, proper conduct of business in the country. You need the voice of business to be heard. Government can come up with all sorts of laws that can actually destroy the environment or make it less competitive. So you want the voice of business, and that's for me the role of the business organization for other parties, other stakeholders to understand what the business community needs are, but also what it is contributing to the country and the economy. I think that that should be the role of the organization. Create a conducive, competitive business environment which helps facilitate and enable the growth of business in the country.
Business association exists to build a constructive dialogue with political stakeholders regarding strategic policies, regulation, and public-private partnership. In our market, in our system, we have, for instance, trade unions that they serve a purpose from the other side of the labor market, and in this case, our associations they add value having these discussions with the government and with the political parties, trying to build a positive framework where entrepreneurship can grow and our system can work properly, more based on multi-sectoral entities where you have to keep an open dialogue with companies that sometimes in the market they are competitors. I think that this second type of association serves better as a forum to generate and exchange ideas and best practices.
And how do you see business association serving that purpose? Is it really more on collaborative nature or reaching out to different stakeholders?
There's several ways which business organizations do it. I think just by being together, you're able to share what the concerns are, and you're also able to alert each other. Because sometimes people don't realize or there's a regulation that's about to be issued. So, so when you're talking to each other, first of all, you're already informing each other. And then the ways by which you protect the interests is to, the public statements, for example, and then the private interactions with other stakeholders such as government.
My career, I have seen several excellent examples of how companies and governments they can work together. It's true that this is a very difficult scenario that is going to affect business associations and all the business community, but we need to keep our work, because normally this context means an increment of taxes and other economic restrictions that will hit the business community, and our role is really needed at the moment, and it will be in the future.
A lot of times, what makes a business organization effective are the people who are actually in it. So you have the people who have the connections to the various parties in government who you can use to push an agenda. I think what the orgs can do is really more on how do you build up the image of business. That business is good, business is a contributor, business does this. Parang business has been doing so much. This private sector this past, especially this past pandemic year.
Think about like the recent developments or new trends, the rise of technology and how that has disrupted a lot of industries. Do you think that that's going to happen also in industry associations?
Are used to promote networking among the business community. We have discovered how to use several tools that help us to produce more activities in a faster way with less resources. And I think that this is a positive change that comes from the COVID scenario, and also from the disruptive technologies that we have had in the recent times.
With this recent trends, no, I'm really pertaining to the political environment, challenging administration's leaders. How do you see the roles of business association changing? Should they adapt?
I think what's happened this last few years is role, the voice of business has been weakened somewhat. Businesses carry significant power that they aren't right now using. Now, one reason might be there are also people on the other side who are taking advantage of the situation. It's a tough balancing act when you have a government. It's like, how do you survive it? And maybe it's time for business to use some of the tactics that they're using, social media.
On the other hand, we have a lot of communication, fake news, excessive noise that we have to control from our entities, and we really need to be reflexive and try to to drive the discussion to a positive dialogue with the government and with other political stakeholders, just to find a common ground, to find the recovery path again.
With all these challenges and that we need to adapt, and using social media, do you think the approach of business associations, the way we reach out, or maybe expanding the network or other sectors, do you think that maybe that's something that the business associations need to do?
Yeah, tapping the sector, other sectors, yes. Now, on whether you can actually get action, personally, yeah, this is just my view. It's a little difficult to do with a large business. It's probably easier to do with a small group of people who decide to work together. Now, that's assuming you can get them to actually agree because they all have their own views also on how things should be done.
Business associations, maybe we are faster listening to the business community and reacting to the market changes. So we need to add that kind of reflection process, and we need to work again with our counterparts, and I'm sorry, but because I tell this many times, but we need to work with our stakeholders. We need to be sure that the policies that they are going to bring on the table to find the recovery path are aligned with the needs of the business community.
Do you think maybe in the future, business associations will depend less on membership and try to find new sources of sources of support.
In the case of AmChams, that we normally will represent American companies abroad, we are starting to see some movements, some restrictions. In my case, in Spain, we are seeing that with particularly companies related to the tourism industry, because the tourism here is totally stuck and is one of the most important industries in the country and is very reactive to changes in the environment. um, but we are positive about other sectors. It's true that in the previous crisis in 2008, I believe that all business associations we suffer losing membership fees. But at the end of the day, if you are a private association, you have two incomes, two sources for income. You have your membership fees and you have sponsorships and your service fees. At the end of the day, they are going to be affected. You need to do some managed control. We need to cut our budget a little bit. We need to be really serious about our expenses. But we will survive this for sure. And we will.
I'd like to thank Ms. Pantaring and Mr. Rueda for giving me the time and the opportunity to have the discussion with them. From those discussions, I'd like to share my key takeaways. First, business associations have a role to play to help nations recover by connecting companies and governments and companies and communities. They should communicate the needs of business, but also its contribution to the country and economy. Business associations should also provide venues for consultative dialogue and co creation between business and other stakeholders, such as government, labor, and the youth. Associations also utilize technology and online tools to expand and reach more important stakeholders. And finally, they should manage costs by leveraging on partnerships and find new sources of revenues. But my most important takeaway is this: there is a need for business organizations to innovate, not for market share, but for relevance. Before we assess the areas of opportunities for business associations to innovate, let's review the existing business model of business associations, or most of the organizations globally. The unique value proposition of business associations is that they help companies overcome the challenges and obstacles in the business environment they are unable to address alone. It's a collective effort that improves the policies and regulations that governs business. And essentially, business association becomes the voice of the business community. But aside from that, they also get other benefits, which is uh, business associations provide them access to new business trends and information, and of course, create avenues for networking. The main customer segments of business associations are mainly the businesses, both small and large, and local and foreign investors. Representatives of these businesses are usually the CEOs and the business owners. These are the relationships and the channels in which we reach, or business association reach its customers. The expected relationship is it's very highly consultative. We engage in a lot of policy advocacy work, and in crafting those recommendations, and we provide opportunities for member companies to have a say, to present how it such regulations or potential laws could impact the way they do business. They also expect to be given a chance to participate in partnership opportunities with government and other companies. We usually have is monthly meetings, general membership meetings, and that's one of the channels where we reach our members. But beginning the COVID-19 pandemic, due to the lockdown, many of these roundtable discussions and information sessions and networking really happens online. We also reach them through press releases and our website and an active social media. And finally, we do release publications, and that's usually where business associations share their findings and recommendations on some policy areas or regulatory reform recommendations. And for the key activities, the associations usually really very much involved in policy regulatory advocacy work, and they conduct a lot of roundtable discussions and conferences. There's business networking, so publications, forums, and also training opportunities. And the key resources here are first and foremost corporate members. There's also a board of trustees that lead the management and the team. And usually the team is very lean. And of course, one of the important resources of business associations network. We have access to many different partners, um, other corporations, both members and non-members, other business groups and industry associations. Of course, there's that linkage with the government, academe, and multilateral organizations. Because of this wide reach and the influence, business associations, one of the key resource there is also the influence that it holds. Now, just reviewing the revenue streams, majority of a business association's revenue really come from annual membership fees, roughly around 60%, although this varies from association to association. And the rest of the revenues are not necessarily a source of profit, but really just revenues, the funded projects and sponsored events. As for the cost structure, it's really the operational expenses uh, that takes really a bulk of the finances. That's the salary; those are the salaries, the utilities, and the rent. And manpower, of course, depends on projects. There are usually consultants and project-based hires, and of course, speakers. There's activities that we need to fund, could be meals, hotels, and transportation. And of course, IT expenses. We hold a vast amount of database from our members, and of course, online communication platforms. Of innovation or potential innovation for business associations, there are services and key offerings by business associations that I feel still will be very significant and relevant. And as shown also in my discussions with Mr. Rueda and Ms. Mantaring, the advocacy part, giving voice, even a much stronger voice to business, especially at this time with so much uncertainty and complexity. um, Business associations still need to maintain this service and even improve on this area. They also need to offer more connections and partnerships. There is a disrupted, the pandemic has disrupted ways in which members of organizations uh, meet and network. There's a lot of even international business matching sessions that do not happen nowadays, or maybe even if they do, it's quite limited and online. And a large part of that business connection, really from the physical interaction, has really been limited by online. And so, in these two areas, there's lots of new ways. It's how do you innovate in terms of activities and the usage or utilization of new tools to make these two activities more effective, and that it serves the purpose of an organization and it serves its member companies. What are the two areas that I think business associations need to think of in the future that they could morph into these two kinds of organizations to be a more bigger organization that it is that there are think tanks and there are business associations. These are two different things. But business associations now are really, it's really a repository of a lot of industry materials, knowledge, data, and information. And the processing this and analyzing it in a think tank manner, and particularly utilizing data, big data, and data analytics. I think this is where business associations can gain more relevance because this also supports their positions if you use more of a data driven decision making. And I think this is, if many business associations go this route, I think the discussions would be much more fruitful and elevated in a more meaningful manner. And it would also give a lot of trust in the intention of these associations when we do come out with recommendations. And then there's this concept of a do tank. Business associations have this unique opportunity to link companies together, companies and local governments, companies and other civil society groups, companies and national government. And they can work together to leverage on resources. And this has really been highly emphasized during COVID time when resources are limited, when community work or bayanihan, that's what we call it has been highlighted as a need. And to actually work together on specific socioeconomic issues with affected stakeholders and partners to move that needle, to address the inclusivity issue, and to address a lot of the challenges faced by minorities. Um, I think this is one area as well that business associations can work on, especially now that a lot of our member companies are beginning to really accept and adopt sustainable development goals, not going beyond CSR and actually incorporating the community work in their business operations, in their supply chains. I think that business associations can do more by linking them together and them with other sectors and the government. I have proposed a possible business new model moving forward. And first, tweaking the value proposition of organizations, business orgs, from a voice of business to partner of business. And this is really to connect companies. So the value that we offer is to connect our member companies uh, to, to each other, to cooperate on shared importance and concern, and to provide opportunities for value creating partnerships with various stakeholders. Our target remains the same. Our customer segments remain the same as businesses, CEOs, and business owners, but paying particular attention to the young next generation business leaders. And this is because I highlighted earlier that a business association needs to adapt and to innovate, not because of not for profit or not for market share, but for relevance. And as business ways and operations change with the times and regulations need to catch up, we need this young next generation leaders creating, disrupting industries to contribute as well in shaping what are the appropriate uh, uh, laws and regulations that would fit this emerging business environment. But I added here also another section of customers, which are the external stakeholders. And this comes from a more broader view of a business association role, which is not just to serve its members, but to serve the community and being that link and that connection. And I added here society and government, both national and local. I haven't really changed much on the customer relationships, except that I think there has to be a more thoughtful or constructive engagement with local and global stakeholders. And again, I'm highlighting the partnership opportunities um, between companies and government, and other sectors. The channels would also remain the same, except I'm adding an interactive website, and this is something to do with our a think tank kind of model. If you see the use of of news channels or other organizations, the think tanks of big data, geospatial solutions, I think we can maximize our uh, database, our materials, and our even publications and the data that we follow. If we provide this kind of information or this service to the public, so it's not just limited to our members. For revenue streams, I think there has to be some tweaking and adjustments and less reliance on membership fees. It should still be a membership based organization, but at least the revenue source has to come from also different areas, and funded projects and sponsored events and trainings still there, also a valuable activity and can be a source of revenue. But also we can earn from transforming our online presence, our online platforms into more interactive and engaging uh, platforms. And there we can actually earn from the ads, potential ads, as we drive more online traffic, online foot traffic. And this is something I think that we can think about. As for activities, it has to be still policy and, regulatory reform advocacy, but more data driven. And roundtable discussions will remain and business networking. But I think, as I emphasized earlier, there has to be action oriented, collaborative projects, things that will move the needle, think things that will things that will move the needle. And if we get a lot of a number of companies together to do a joint project that has a social impact and not just a business impact, I think that is something that would be a really good value add for business associations. Um, and I added, of course, here, nothing has changed except that young members, and they will be a very valuable resource to the organization. As for partners, I expanded it to sectoral groups as well as local and foreign academe partners. As for the cost structure, I think with everyone having a taste of work from home and flexible work arrangements because of the lockdown, and it has to uh, business associations have to think about extending these types of arrangements so as to manage costs, particularly on rent and utilities, um, and invest more in data analytics, big data, and business analytics. And I'd like to focus my final uh, part of the presentation is really just focus on activities. And these are really centered on three things, the use of big data and data analytics. Because I think this will not only drive the policy and regulatory reform work, but it will democratize data and information. And it will also address our problem that there's still some communication gaps between the business community and society or the general public. We need to to change that narrative of the business is the bad guy, when there are a lot of legitimate uh, businesses that do good, and which leads me to aligning that action focused collaborative projects aligned with SDGs, uh, targeting inclusive and co-creating approaches to community building. I think it will also develop more meaningful partnerships with different stakeholders and leverage resources of our individual member companies and other organizations. And then finally, it will really build more stronger and more positive roles or areas for contribution for business, for companies. And I think business associations have uh, the influence and the capability to lead that to lead this initiative. And then finally, on communication, better. We need to bridge to become a better bridge between the business sector and the society, and the business sector and the governments. And there's a lot of disinformation, fake news, and misinformation happening. And by being more engaging and transparent, we share our data, we share our findings, and we consult uh, more broader stakeholder. I think we can really achieve a more uh, that co-creation that I was talking about earlier. And I think that really is how things are developing in business associations world. And there might still be areas for wild innovation to happen, but just based on my discussions with stakeholders and in my own um, experience, I think the core mission and purpose of business associations still remain. The innovation aspect there is the how, and how do we engage? How do we make that impact? And what it means is really stepping out of our circle and engaging more sectors, and utilizing new technology so we become relevant and important in not just for the business but for the economy and for governments and society. Thank you.